Thank you, Varna. I think you really had a wake-up call with 60% increase in the incidence of cancer. We all feel that this crisis is looming and policy decisions has to be taken. She mentioned some important initiatives that have been taken to bring down the overuse of pesticides. The Better Cotton Initiative is one. I think there are two things are involved in this. One is the use of technology through advocacy and extension. Mr. Kamal Bhatta had also mentioned about the importance of extension. So technology is available to take it to the people and make them adopt it. So we need both advocacy and extension work to make it work, whether it is through mobile application or through human interface, that is to be done. Second point that she mentioned is about policy. There are some policies which government takes, like the urea pricing of fertilizers, which have lasting effect, and these have to be corrected immediately, otherwise we will have deteriorating situation year after year. Unfortunately, these are all well-known facts. Government also knows it, all the academics know it, but not enough is being done to stop, to change these policies. So I think it's time that people spoke up, and a lot of NGOs and farmer groups and all that should really wake up to the lasting benefits of better, whether it's Better Cotton Initiative or better farming practices, that will save them from a lot of problem at the end. We have had one round now. If there are, I think we should have an interactive session. If there are any questions people would like to ask, please raise your hand. Please speak let us know your name, what you are doing, and if this question is addressed to any one of the panelists, say so.
Hello. I am Professor Kuldeep Singh, working in MIT University, Noida. And presently I am working as emeritus scientist also. Working in soil, crop, nutrition, health linkage, agriculture, nutrition, health. Yeah. I am thankful to all the panelists for their explanation regarding the issues in Punjab. But I have two particular questions to Patnaik ji and to Gole. Why Punjab government or Union government is not banning this burning of crop residues, especially this rice straw? Secondly, why government is silent on this burning of crop residues, and another burning issue of that is ban on boring of tube wells. Why government is allowing to bore the tube well when that is going underground, what is being misutilized, surface water is being utilized? Why government is silent? Why there is no policy to ban this boring of tube wells and the burning of these residues, which are creating a lot of nuisance and environment pollution and what not? Everybody knows these two problems, but why government is silent? Why there is no policy? Please explain.
Well, I answer both the questions, I think. Firstly, about the burning of residues. There is, in fact, a government order notification banning burning of residues. Question is, it's not being implemented. Government year after year issues notices, issue notification saying that burning of residues is banned. But it has to be, actually you can only pass a law if it is implemented. It is implementable, so it's not being implemented. One good step that Punjab government has taken is they have banned sowing of paddy before 15th June. So earlier they used to start sowing even in May when the water was short supply. So that is one good step. Maybe one needs to take more such steps. Regarding water table, this is really a critical issue. Just to give you some figures, the critical depth, if 10 meters is a critical depth, in 1973, only 3% of the tube wells were more than 10 meters deep. 1990, 25% of the tube wells were reported to be more than the critical depth. By 1994, 46% of the tube wells have gone beyond the critical depth. And the average rate of receding of water table is 55 centimeters per year. Every year it's going down by 55 centimeters. So large areas of Punjab, particularly central Punjab, Moga, Sangrur, even Doaba areas like Ludhiana and Jalandhar, they are likely to go dry very soon. So it is a critical issue, but again, difficult to implement any such thing on a large scale. There is a regulation that for any boring any tube well, you have to take permission from the government.
Yeah. Who gave this permission?
It's not banned, but government permission is to be taken. But people really, very few people really do take permission. They go ahead. Connections of electricity connections. Electricity connections were banned, but before elections, suddenly the whole areas were, all the electricity connections were given. Mr. Gole will
add something. This burning of crop residue, actually, we had discussed with the farmers. Basically, he is doing that to avoid the labor cost, and it is simple. But we are trying to educate. We have some pilot projects wherein how to this paddy straw can be used, and that Happy Seeder PAU has developed. So because of that, when we are able to convince the farmers, at least 80-90% of the farmers, they agree. So this has happened last season in around 3 villages. So some more projects also we are trying to implement. So that is one thing. And as Gokulji has very rightly said, it is difficult to implement those kind of laws. They are not practically implementable. That is the thing. That much means I can say. And again, because of these bore wells, there is a cost to the farmer on submersible pumps. Now, earlier that was simple centrifugal pump could be there. But now more than 20-meter water table that has reached in 50% of the areas. So now necessarily they have to go for submersible pumps. It has a increased cost. Then again there is a burden on the government for subsidy to electricity, because electricity is free. So their subsidy burden is also increasing because they are going for submersible pumps.
I'd just like to add, sir, I don't think government ban will solve the problem. Probably we'll have to show them a more remunerative way. If residues could be utilized to give them some profit, then they'll stop burning. If it could be sellable, if, as I said earlier, that there are now technology available to make it into a useful, valuable commodity. So if that could be done, maybe private sector companies can come and take up this thing. We tried some experiment in Patiala to have a thermal power station, but that became very difficult because of the, because of bundling and cost of carrying straw all the way to do that. But again, that's the only way it can be solved, not by government fiat.
One, sir, please.
Brick kilns are also using them as a fuel in some parts.
But it is only limited. One question, please, remaining.
My name is Jitendra from Down to Earth magazine. Actually, I have done one story on that, how Haryana farmer is using a paddy straw in using as for a livelihood. Small farmers are using it as a livelihood by making producing a mushroom in a Panipat on a large scale. So 2-3 years back, they have burned those straw, and it's causing so much pollution. But now from last 3-4 years, they have stopped burning and giving it in a free to those small farmers. Earlier they were used to work in Azadpur Mandi. Now they went back to their village and start producing that. This is the thing, I can share you that article with you.
Thank you. I think mushroom is a good example of converting into a useful thing, but the use of straw in mushroom is very little, very limited. Only I have been to those villages myself. The total use is hardly 1 or 2% of the total straw produced.
But the story of that panchayat is 2-3 panchayat I have covered. So it's a different. Now they stopped burning. The thing is this, they stopped burning. They used to do earlier. So my question is to Bhattaji, that you said, and you all panelists are agreed that the labor crisis is there in agriculture. I have been visited last month in across the Karnataka, earlier Madhya Pradesh, and different states I am visiting. I am covering agriculture and rural issues for the magazine. Everywhere I am finding that there is a labor crisis exist, and so I wanted to know that what is the response of the farmer to this labor crisis. Mechanization is there, but labor is still they need a labor. What is the response of the farmer to this crisis, and how do you see this crisis?
If I talk towards this labor crisis from Punjab perspective, you see there is only one operation in paddy and wheat cycle which is not mechanized. Otherwise, everything is mechanized in Punjab. Because I say, for example, it is only transplantation of rice. Otherwise, it is harvesting of wheat, harvesting of rice, sowing of wheat, spraying, etc. Anything. It is all mechanized. So you can see the receptivity or the flair of the farmer for the mechanization. And I think that came from the relative profitability of the crops, because we started increasing due to the success of Green Revolution. And when there is I think the prices of the technology that or the machines, they were not as high as compared to the relative prices of the labor, I will say. So when there is there is one operation, and there is no normally a potential alternative for the rice plantation, transplantation. Otherwise, the farmer is willing to go for that as well. So I don't think there is that kind of labor crisis. Actually, the farmers are not willing to pay as high as per the.
37 million labor has been shifted from agriculture to other sectors.
Yeah.
Lots of research papers
Because
are
they
there.
don't have any work in agriculture.
Yes.
So, but why
If you see the
farmers
cost of,
are,
if you see the cost of cultivation data for the from 70s, you will see there is more than 50% decline in the use of labor in agriculture. Important crops are paddy, wheat and cotton, everywhere. So that is why the issue is that those people are not finding the employment avenues in the other sectors of the economy. And they are basically trapped. And then here comes Narega and all the other things and their basic needs. They probably are not willing to work below a certain level of wage. And then I think there is there is some conflict as well. Okay? When you talk about, ask these agriculture laborers, वो बोलेंगे कि एग्रीकल्चर में काम नहीं करूंगा मैं.
sir,
I think,
just extending it,
Just to give you a little bit of macro picture, 65 to 70% of labor in India depend on agriculture. Rural population depends on agriculture, which produces less and less of GDP. Today, I think it's about 13 to 14% of GDP is contributed by agriculture. A sector which contributes only 13 to 14% cannot sustain 65% of the workforce. Therefore, one has to reduce labor in agriculture, but the question is where to find alternative avenues. So that is the bigger question. It's not that we must keep agriculture labor intensive and give all the people job in agriculture. We must find alternative, Mr. Gole mentioned about animal husbandry, fisheries, so many other jobs, even tertiary sectors like transport and other things. We have to find alternative vocation for them, because if they continue to be on agriculture itself will become less cost effective.
Sir, excuse me.
Hi,
Can we come out with some strong recommendation out of this panel discussion and session regarding purchase of crop and this rice residue by the government? As they are purchasing rice grain, wheat grain, can't they purchase this residue which is a valuable resource? Can't the government prepare a policy to purchase these crop residues which are being burnt in the air and creating lot of environment pollution.
Not a question of purchase, what will they do with after the purchase? The question of whether they have the capability of processing it. I think this is purely, let's not put everything on government, let the
But
private sector. This is a meeting of partly organized
But
by
why
CII.
government is giving stress to purchase wheat and rice and so many free electricity, free water? They can't purchase this, which is a valuable resource of the country.
Even for paddy and rice, there is
Yes.
there is a question mark.
Lady there.
Yeah. No, because it is now not.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, while we are all talking about the green revolution and the crisis that has, come about because of it, it was really interesting listening to all your viewpoints, but as a researcher, my concern is, are we missing out the lessons that green revolution itself teaches us to get out of this crisis? If we look at green revolution, there was a crisis of national food security, which we face today in the context that if we move out of Punjab, it becomes a big national question. For the state level, again, what does the farmer do if he goes beyond the 2-crop cycle? Then there is a question of knowledge management. What happens next? Where do we get the knowledge from what we are going to do? And then, of course, behavior change, attitude change. All of these, incidentally, were tackled very beautifully at the time of Green Revolution. It's just now that we are facing a different set of questions, but are we actually rejecting the methodology of going about it, putting the heads together at the national level, at the state level, at the research center level, at the Krishi Vigyan Kendra levels, and also at the civil society levels at some point? Are we throwing the baby along with the bath water? That's what my question is. Thank you.
Madam, while I agree with you, no one is belittling the effect of or the contribution of Green Revolution. At its time, it was needed, it was done, and it has taught us a number of lessons. I would just compare it with a surgical procedure. You have an operation, it's successful, but it is the after-operation care that is also very important. Our operation was successful, we achieved self-sufficiency in food, but have we taken care what was needed to be done after that to continue the success stories? That is where we are saying that much more could be done and can be done even now. No one is belittling, no one is saying Green Revolution was wrong or it was done the wrong way. We have learnt a lot of lessons, but let's encash those lessons, let us build on them. So let's continue what we now, some people, Dr. Swaminathan said, evergreen revolution. So that is the point. We agree with you that yes, it has taught us a number of things. It has solved it has solved a crisis at that stage. We are in a crisis. We are in a our finance, food minister was going with the begging bowl. Today we are a surplus country. In fact, what has happened now is that total production of fruit and vegetables has exceeded the production of food grains in the country. So things are changing, but we are all impatient, and a lot of you are much younger than me, so you should be young and angry that something more could be done. That's what we are talking about. We are not finding faults with what was done in the past, in the 60s. So let's take the lessons and learn from it and build on it.
Good afternoon all. Hi.
May I have?
Okay.
Thank you. Sir, this is not a question directly to the panelist actually. This is to the industry. The sustainability crisis of agriculture in Punjab is due to overuse of inputs, be it water, be it pesticides, be it fertilizers. But the supplier of pumps are industry, supplier of fertilizer and pesticides is the industry. And we are in an industry forum discussing about the sustainability of agriculture in Punjab. My question, or rather the issue, is in what way we can bring industry along to help the farmers to come out of this, to restore sustainability and the natural resources again in Punjab. In what way industry participation is possible? Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a very pertinent question, especially in a forum such as this. And I think what I highlighted earlier about how we've been working with industry and what that is one model. I'm sure there are a lot more models that people can talk about. It's basically making sure that industry starts to understand their impact and especially their water footprint across the value chain. So not just looking at water they're extracting, but also if they're relying on agricultural produce, is that agricultural produce coming in a sustainable fashion or not? And that's ultimately the problem. Yesterday there was a water panel where the usage of industry, water usage was mentioned as only 4%. Well, I'll actually, if you look at water usage, it's all about their supply chain and it's a lot more than that 4%. That 89% that was used as agriculture, we don't know very specifically how much, but a large portion of that would be going into industry. And so industry has to be sensitized to that issue, that it's not just about your direct water usage, but it's in the water in your supply chain, extending up to your agricultural inputs. And that's something that needs to come out stronger, and I think, I'm sure CII will be able to create that great awareness at a different level. But that's something that has to be done, not just globally, but also from an India perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to add, earlier in her exposition, she had mentioned three things. She had mentioned the use of technology to reduce the overuse of inputs, the use of advocacy to tell people to, knowledge to take people harmony. For instance, I know in the days of synthetic parathreads, Punjab farmers in cotton, instead of 6, they used to spray 11 or 12 sprays of synthetic parathreads, and sometimes the cotton field would die out because of overspraying. So what is good for them, what is the optimum use, and third is extension work. In all these three, I think industry can take a role, take a leading role, either in research, finding out the right technology, in extension, and in advocacy. For instance, a simple thing like micro irrigation or SRI. SRI can save a lot of water use as well as improve productivity. But then it's not been very popular, at least in Punjab. In other places it has taken off, but not in Punjab. So maybe the industry could direct this thing. I know that a lot of basmati traders, exporters are working in Punjab. They should popularize SRI technologies and other other technologies which are, Mr. Kamal mentioned about tensometers, use of laser levelers and others. These extension could be done by the industry. So industry has a big role. I think today, in today's situation, I would say that industry can play a much bigger role than even the government. Government should only be left at the policy level. Actual work on the ground level should be taken up by the industry.
Hello.
Now, as our friend has said about the role of industry, I think, and again Patnaik ji Saab has also added, these companies, they can utilize their CSR for this educating the farmers, and many these companies they are doing. For example, I know in Jain Irrigation in Maharashtra, they are educating the farmers about the use of water and number of other things. So similarly, the companies who are producing these pump sets or the other things, they can educate the farmers. In fact, it will benefit to them also. If some high efficiency pump sets are, they are prepared, and then it will help the farmers also, and in turn company also will be gaining. So that way also these companies, they can come forward, and NABARD will be too glad to collaborate with the CSRs of the companies for this kind of education to the farmers.
Just one quick question, aspect I want to add is that a lot of these companies, whether it's pesticide companies or fertilizer companies, they are providing, and their extension system into the village level, at the field level, is far greater and far better, more efficient, more robust in some ways than the current agricultural extension system so many times. And they're able to reach and create that awareness within among the farmers. But sometimes the biopesticides and biofertilizers, which are sometimes subsidized, don't have that same support system. And as a result of that, you have all kinds of products being offered, which are, while being very effective, because of a robust extension system, they end up using these products and they don't find that they're actually working on the ground. Because what happens is that if they've not been used for a long time, they have expired. So biopesticides, a lot of times they say, oh, they're not effective, while the pesticides, regular toxic pesticides are more effective, because the biopesticides might actually have expired in many cases. Those extension systems are not strong enough to be able to push the farmers at the right time, at the right place. So sometimes that also ends up happening. And I think that's something where industry has started to expand into biopesticides and biofertilizers. But I think that has to be a greater pull and a push from both the supply and the demand side.
Hello.
Okay, so with the last question.
I'm here. Hello.
The last two questions.
Okay.
1 and 2.
Hello everyone. I'm Jayavant Patil. I'm from Pune, Maharashtra. I'm an organic farmer by passion. I was hoping that the panel would emphasize more on the term organic farming when it comes to the sustainable agriculture. So mainly the misconception or the conception about organic farming, why people don't talk about it because of its low yield. But my experience has been in last 5 years is completely different. There are farmers in our area who are taking 80 to 90 tons of sugar cane per acre. Same goes with the ginger. And at the same time, a lot of reduction in the input cost. So when it comes to the organic farming, it actually addresses most of the problems about excessive water consumption in the conventional farming, the non-drought prone seed varieties compared to the organic seed. So I have seen a lot of challenges in promoting the organic farming. I just wanted to understand from the panel, what have been your experiences when you actually go to the farmer while promoting the organic farming, and what are their concerns?
Well, we did not talk much about organic farming, correct? Because we are talking mainly about the crisis in Punjab. Punjab is not the best state in the country for organic farming. Though I am aware that increasingly people are going into organic farming. In fact, I am a trustee of Prince of Wales Bhumi Bardhan Foundation, and we are working in Punjab and Sangrur and Patiala district. About 1,000 farmers doing wheat and rice have gone into organic farming. But when I talk to them, most of them say that out of someone has 6 acres, he does 2 acres for organic farming for his own family, and 4 acres otherwise with chemicals for selling in the market. So productivity is an issue, and Punjab farmers typically measure their success by the quantity they produce. But increasingly, I think we'll have to do this with advocacy and also by demonstration, by market tie-ups, and by demonstrating that productivity-wise organic production can be as good as anything else. So I think it will take time. Punjab is today very much into the highest consumer of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So it will take time to convert, but slowly, particularly with increasing disease incidents, like Bhavna mentioned, 60% cancer, cause of cancer is due to pesticide and other things. So increasingly people are getting the message and converting into organic farming. I hope this drive will increase, and but we'll have to first demonstrate that productivity is as high and the profitability is as good as in the other chemical use of chemicals and fertilizers. Let's
yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Anjay Rao. I come from Asian Paints. Probably this is a very layman kind of a question. So what I've learned in the last 2 days is like there is over exploitation of resources, and there is excess usage of water. So because of which, like today, now we are discussing about Punjab, rice, which is a water intensive crop. In the morning, one of the panelists more diverse crops, and we also trying to address the issue of malnutrition. Now, will it lead to food security issues? The transition from a highly productive kind of a thing to a more sustainable kind of an agriculture production. So will it lead to food security issues? And at the same time, we are a highly malnourished country, and we also are trying to address that problem as well. So that's the question. I don't know whether it's a layman question, but yeah.
No, I think that's a valid point. The earlier point that was raised earlier about whether Green Revolution really led to the sustainable, to the kind of impact that was a crisis that it addressed. But at the same time, it also meant that we're not sure if Punjab can continue to agriculture in its current form in the long term or not. And if it means that there's going to be such a significant drop in productivity, I don't think it can lead to national basic requirements or nutritional requirements of the country. So I think when we're talking about long-term issues, in the short term, yes, we've solved a problem, but we created a much bigger mammoth problem. And it's not just about the short term. And I think if we think about it in the longer term, we are actually taking a much more balanced and robust approach, which will lead to the long-term nutritional benefits for the country. Now, if you're talking about even Punjab, nutrition is an important aspect, but if pesticides and fertilizer are making people not have new types of gluten allergies, I'm not so sure that's really what we want to get out of a lot of these pesticide usages.
I'll just give you a simple answer. If Bihar and Eastern UP produce at the same level that Punjab is producing today, there will be no malnutrition in the country.
Can I add? I think if you divide the whole country into two regions, where one is more intensively cultivated or more intensively cultivated, or the other ones which are more rain-fed or they have less water, then you try to understand these agricultural production functions, basically how much water and then how much output. So probably we are not operating in the second zone of production, means we are not producing optimally. So the moment, I think there is need to be research that if we reduce the use of water in agriculture in the water intensive regions, you will not have any decline in the productivity. But at the same time, the moment you increase the area under water by 1 to 2 or 3, 4, 5% in the rain-fed or other regions, the productivity increases a lot. So I think we have to learn the lessons from Punjab of the unsustainable intensification and take those lessons to bring the sustainable intensification in the other regions. Then probably we can achieve the food security. That's not an issue.
Secondly, in fact, the crops which we are marginalized, like jawar or bajra, are the minor millets. In fact, they are more nutritious than the paddy and wheat. And secondly, there is an overproduction of paddy and wheat in the country now. We don't need. A lot of paddy and wheat is being wasted because there are no adequate storage facilities. So actually what we need, even the pulses and oil seeds, which we are importing. So instead of that, there will be more balanced nutritional security. If we replace this wheat and rice, rice with pulses, oil seeds, then jawar, bajra, minor millets. So in fact that is required for nutritional security.
So just one point, is it that we need a much more holistic approach at a country level than a very localized kind of an approach?
Yeah, I think we have reached a stage where, like Punjab farmers, overuse of our time in this session, we should close the session now. The lesson, I think, is the answer to the first question, why Punjab? Because Punjab provides a mirror to what is going to happen in future, and the crisis that Punjab is facing today is going to be the crisis in other places if you don't take care. So there are a number of lessons to be learned from Green Revolution and its after effects, water use, fertilizer use and overuse of incentives in Punjab. I think it's a right, I would say that the organizers have done well to make Punjab a case study. And if we can just take the lessons from it and spread it across and into the policy, convert into the right policies, sustainability would be a goal which can be achieved. Thank you very much, and I'm grateful to all our panelists, Kamal Bhatta, Mr. P.M. Gole, Bhavna Prasad, for a very interesting discussion, and of course the audience for the interactive session. Thank you.